All right. We are joined by Lee DeLange from South Dakota. Actually, I befriended him and his wife at the Annual Buffalo Roundup. They, along with my friend Anong and I, were all paired together to ride on the truck bed and follow and track the buffalo herd. So I got to meet him and his lovely wife when I was in South Dakota, and we've been in touch ever since. And I wanted him to come talk on about his company, his work in the energy sector, and also why he's so passionate about the great outdoors. So Lee, it's good to finally have you on both my podcast and the simulcast that'll go on my YouTube channel.
Yeah, it's very good to be here. It's great seeing and talking to you again. And it's been a pretty wild few months since the last time we saw each other.
Yes, it has. It certainly has. I bet a lot of people are moving to South Dakota. Am I hearing you and your wife were telling me that so many people were, but is the market still very hot? I keep hearing words that it is.
It is, yes. We're still seeing that influx of people and interest in relocating. And, as our governor has stated for several months, our state is open for business. And I think that message is getting across to a lot of people. And we're still seeing the people come to our area.
Yes, you guys certainly do, especially because I think she's been able to have a balance with obviously treating the virus seriously, but not closing down everything. And I think that's why that principle is such a huge draw with people. I never thought I would see Californians moving to South Dakota.
Yeah, it's really crazy. And I think we've done a good job. And I think the governor did, she moved in the right direction, saying basically that the South Dakotans know the seriousness of the situation. They know how to handle it. And I think we've responded pretty well, and everyone won't agree to that. But I think it's one of those issues that I don't think we'll ever agree on, but it's been really good so far. And I think we're seeing some good numbers lately. So, but yeah, and Amy and I live just a little bit outside of town up in the hills, enjoy the pine trees every day. And within, a matter of a couple months, we had two people move onto our block, and they're both from California.
Wow.
Both bought sight unseen and loaded up the van, and here they come. So I don't think we have not seen the end of that sort of trend yet.
Yeah, and I expect you guys will see a continued growth. I think, I forget which economic indicator or publication put it out, but they said South Dakota was like one of the top 5 states that people are moving into. So I anticipate you guys are going to have a lot more transplants coming in soon.
Well, it's a great place to be. I love it.
It's beautiful. It was, like I told you and Amy, it was my first time ever to the state, and I loved it. It was just so beautiful, breathtaking, fresh air, great people, delicious food. It was a grand time. So anyone contemplating a move or at least a visit will like it, I think. Yeah.
And, that the roundup that you and I were able to share the back of a pickup truck. And I kind of found out later that, based on the video that I took, and I'm sure you got some amazing footage as well. I heard from a lot of people, like, you don't know how lucky you guys are to kind of be in the location you were, and to have the route chosen, by your driver that you did. And some of the, we were right in the thick of it for a lot of it. So that was pretty amazing. Once in a lifetime for sure. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. Very bumpy. I think I had a few bruises afterwards, but it was worth it to get all the footage and just to see that firsthand. It was super incredible. I've only had, I don't think even like seeing the buffalo stall in Yellowstone really compares. It's cool, but you don't get to ride at like really high speeds, of course. But yeah, that was certainly a life-changing, once in a lifetime experience. I will certainly say that too. Yeah. And we were talking about energy in addition to a lot of things, because you actually work in the energy industry. And before you went to this company you work with now, you worked with another energy company, more traditional. So why don't you explain what it's like working in the energy industry, kind of what is happening, and specifically with your company too? Yeah, well, I started out right out of school working for the local electric utility company, and really started out as an intern and really didn't know where that was going to lead, and I got to be within a department that focused on energy savings for customers. And so most of my career there centered around helping energy users use their energy better, find better solutions, understand how we use energy. So I really got, centered on that, on that part of the industry. And it was, you know, it was a really good experience over the 23 years I was involved in helping really large companies understand their electric bill all the way down to residential customers, really understand, you know, how they use energy. And so that became very important to me. And the more that I grew in that company, it's a fantastic company to work for, and I still have great relationships with everyone there. But what I found is that I really had a desire to like think about it a little differently and really understand that is this the best way to do something? And that's the question that always rattles around my head no matter what I'm doing. And so really applying that to my career path, you know, looking at you know, solar and wind and all that was sort of the buzz in the early 2000s, and it started to mature fairly rapidly. And I saw where, particularly solar, where that was going, and it was growing very rapidly, and the costs were coming down. And all of a sudden, there was this notion that could this energy source really get to that point where it's kind of on par in terms of price and viability with traditional fossil fuel. And that was sort of remarkable to think about. And so here we are, you know, it's sort of a reality today. And so at the end of my career with the electric utility company, I had that desire just to be somewhere where I kind of wanted to be on the front lines and see some tangible results of some of those you know, real life solutions that could be delivered to our clients. And then, you know, it got to a point where I started thinking about, well, you know, there's a better way probably to approach renewable energy versus traditional. And the way that most companies possibly think about it, I think, you know, we have a lot of peers in the industry that go about renewable energy in a different way, and that's than what we do. And that's pretty much to go up, you know, head to head against fossil fuel. You know, we hear it in the news all the time, you know, obviously in the last week, you know, what's happened to the oil and gas industry. Not a lot of good has happened to them, you know, and who knows where that's going to take us in the future. And you know, one of the differences that, you know, in that mentality and that go-to-market approach for GenPro Energy Solutions is that we really see those utility companies as partners. It's a pretty high priority for us to be a part of the change in the industry that helps make that transition from fossil fuel to renewables and other sustainable energy sources. Let's do that smarter. Let's do that so that it doesn't, you know, it's not painful for anybody as much as possible, and, you know, bring that solution on in a really, really wise way, and partner with the utility companies. So my move from there to GenPro Energy was really driven, you know, by that decision. Like, I really wanted to be part of that solution. I understand both sides of the coin, so I'm a little bit of a, you know, well, all of us at GenPro typically are kind of like an anomaly in the industry, where we're in the, you know, live in the middle of South Dakota, and we're, you know, ranked number 7 in the U.S. for, you know, in solar contractors across the country. So it's just weird to think about that. But, you know, it's having both sides of the, you know, the industry from the traditional to renewable, and, you know, thinking about how can we best make this transition. And it, you know, it's working out great. We have really good relationships with utilities all over the Midwest. We are doing projects on the East Coast, New York, New Jersey, Maryland, Illinois. We're going to be in Arkansas this year, Nebraska. And so those opportunities, I think, come from having this approach to energy. Like, it's not all or nothing or one or the other. It's all of the above approach. Let's understand what's best for the energy users in this country, and let's package something. Let's take all the solutions available and determine what's best financially, what's best environmentally, what's best just from a feasibility standpoint, what makes the most sense, and deliver that. And so I think that's working, and that's really what I've enjoyed over the last 4 years being here. And it's a good time. You know, the industry is just doing really, really well right now.
That's very interesting how you put it. Yeah, because I think you see other people in clean energy companies kind of lambast oil and gas. And we had this conversation in the truck bed about this, but that's a very unique approach, because I still think we're still not I would say opposed to solar, but because for many people who live closer to cities, oil and gas, or especially natural gas, is kind of the cheaper option. And I think if people are presented solar kind of from a holistic perspective, they may be open to it if they put it on their house. Actually, one great congressman who does, I think he fully powers his house by solar, but he's against like mandating it, is Massie of Kentucky. So I look to him as kind of like an example. And what you said kind of reminded me of him, and how he encourages it, but he doesn't encourage it by coercion, which
Right.
other companies kind of follow that model, because you can't convince people to consider an energy source if you're coercing them. Especially with, I don't know how you and your colleagues at your company respond to comments. I think the climate envoy, John Kerry, said that people who work in oil and gas can easily transition to solar panel technicians. Is that true? Because it's a different skill set from my understanding.
Yeah, no, I don't think that would be entirely true. I don't think I would make that statement personally. It's a very different set of skills, and it's actually very tough to find, really good workforce in this particular area, because, there's across the country, there's about 250,000 people that work in the renewable energy industry across the country. Being in the Midwest, it's even harder to attract a workforce that has any experience at all. So, it's not an easy transition. From oil and gas. It's sort of apples and oranges, but hey, any great worker that has a great attitude and wants to learn, we're all about it though.
Yeah, that's probably more encouraging to hear, rather than obviously every type of extractive, I would say traditional energy source, it requires digging, it requires using very advanced tools, going in mines, going into different areas, and solar is very different. So yeah, it was really kind of tone deaf to hear John Kerry talk about that, but I don't think he has really any basic understanding of energy much, because he didn't want wind actually right near his house, from what I remember. So it's interesting to preach clean energy, but doesn't want it in his backyard.
Right. Yeah, we hear that a lot, right? Yeah.
And with kind of just the advent of renewables, and I know there's a lot of different sources, there's geothermal as well. Wind is quite contentious too at times, especially in terms of land use. But with solar in particular, I think people forget that if you transition away from oil and gas, you're not going to have the necessary components to make solar panels or to kind of construct that. Is that true? Like, what exactly goes into a solar panel, and do they still need to use kind of these minerals and these traditional fuel byproducts in order to be constructed?
Yeah, good question. And I admit I'm probably not going to be able to answer this completely. I have people that could do a much better job. But yes, you're right. I mean, that's, and even going beyond the solar panels, what we're going to hear more of in the future is really the battery technology. Because when you talk about the growth and the direction of the renewable energy industry, battery storage is going to be a big topic of conversation. And, you're already seeing the pros and cons of that, and characterizing battery storage as renewable. But, there's some arguments that could be made that could be against that. So, extracting, the materials needed for that. So I actually honestly think that, what goes into a battery and the part that battery storage is going to play in the future, it will, on one hand, it's going to make renewable energy even that much more viable, and it will make sense across the entire, the grid in terms of how renewable energy can be integrated into the overall, deployment of energy across the entire country. So battery storage is really, probably going to be even more of an issue than maybe solar panels are. So But yeah, you're right. I mean, it's a balance. It's just sort of looking at what's best for us, what's most sustainable. And sometimes it's not a really clear-cut answer.
Do you think there's also going to be perhaps confusion with the government kind of coming in, where companies like yours more so could be more adept at kind of swaying people to do solar? I feel like sometimes when the government comes in, and I'm against oil subsidies too, but I think anytime sometimes you see the subsidies come in, it kind of doesn't balance out things. And I think companies like yours that are innovating don't really need the government to come in and innovate. But do you kind of worry that some of your colleagues or some of your counterparts in solar may rely too much on the government, whether it is about innovation? And do you prefer, let's say, the private model to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good question. And there's a lot of people excited right now that the solar industry is going to be positively impacted. And, I see where that's coming from. We have the end user in mind, in our day-to-day business, and our business model is built around what's best for the end user, what really makes sense financially. And when you have something that comes in and artificially impacts pricing, then, I tend to look at that as probably a negative. I would rather the market work on its own. Prices have gone down 70% for solar energy, for example, in the last 10 years. It's doing very well. I mean, it makes sense financially right now, almost wherever you go, kind of depending, in some parts of the country, they could still enjoy pretty low electric rates, but electric rates aren't going down. They're going the opposite direction. And so the solar and other renewable energy, I really believe at the end of the day, we need to, rely on, incentive tax credit, for example. The ITC has been, I think, personally a great tool to sort of get the ball rolling, but they need to be phased out, and we need to do that reasonably over time so that the industry can stand on its own. So I agree. Personally, don't like subsidies at all, because you're really dealing with a false sense of really how you're doing, and I would rather have us, and that's the way we function every day. When we build a system, when we price out a system and do the financial analysis on it, it's got to stand on its own. Otherwise, we might not be interested in doing it. So that's kind of where we're at.
I appreciate you illuminating me on that. And I think the listeners will also find that to be really interesting, because you often don't hear that, and maybe certain companies are propped up more than others. I know with certain other green technology companies that were fraudulent in years past, really didn't have a foot to stand on. And I think smaller organizations like yours probably have more of a, let's say, a virtuous kind of operating system in place where you want to innovate, you want to offer a quality product, you want people to actually educate themselves about this type of clean energy source, rather than perhaps be elevated to a point and you don't really come to fruition. I think that was with Solyndra, and then I saw some other company too that I think collapsed as a result of getting a lot of subsidies and also a lot of backing from the government. They didn't really materialize; they were just constructed, and nothing came about those companies. Yeah.
I think to me, it's important to, base a business model off of something that doesn't change every 2 to 4 years. That's a bit of a risk. So, I think the value of what we do speaks for itself, and it doesn't have to be propped up necessarily. Of course, certainly there are programs and there are things out there that really help people get engaged and, get some stuff on the ground that maybe normally wouldn't. And so certainly not, I like to see some of that stuff that sort of serves its purpose, and but certainly not something that's permanently bolted on to our industry.
You also are a very avid sportsman. We were trading stories about hunting, and actually after I had seen you, I got my first deer in Wyoming in the region next door to you guys, and you were talking about elk hunting, and I was really sad that I couldn't see the elk herd in the Wind Cave National Park nearby Custer State Park, but just seeing all the different wildlife, hearing your different stories about South Dakota, why don't you talk about the hunting opportunities you've experienced and what makes it so unique? And also fishing too, if you want to talk about that as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you bet. I mean, I as a sportsman, I don't live in a better place in the country, in my opinion. there's something about the Black Hills that you got to taste a little bit when you were out here for the Buffalo Roundup. And I have, enjoyed it my entire life. And over the years, my interest changes a little bit. I don't know, call it maturity or whatever, but anymore, it's I just love going out and getting tree therapy, I call it, just sitting in the tree and just maybe not even taking the bow off its stand, but just sort of sitting, just sitting in the tree and just enjoying creation. But I, grew up archery hunting. Probably my favorite animal to chase is the white-tailed deer, and with my stick and string. And there's just something about them. They're incredibly smart. They have this instinct that you just can't figure out, and so they're always a puzzle. They're always a mystery figuring out. They could be, you could have them patterned all fall, and then first day of opening, season, they disappear for whatever reason. So they're a huge challenge. I love chasing them. In summertime, you can probably find me at a lake. Not so much this last summer, but typically I love being in the boats, and chasing walleyes. That's my favorite fish. So we have to travel a couple hours to the Missouri River to get into walleyes. Besides that, I've taken some elk hunting trips, typically to Colorado. I killed a Boone and Crockett black bear up in Canada here several years ago. That was a very fun trip. So, and then we hunt wild hogs down in Texas. So pretty much, got this 2,000 mile swath of land that I play in and love every minute of it. And yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like a dream from what I remember and what you were communicating here. And I think a lot of people fail to understand and kind of see the connection between people who work in your industry and those who partake in sportsmen's activities. And even with traditional fuel sources, and I think even clean energy sources, people don't see the connection that you can engage yourself in energy extractive type or energy industry related professions and also simultaneously enjoy the great outdoors. And I think because you have a basis of stewardship, you don't want to see the land exhausted or abused or improperly managed. So kind of what is your philosophy as someone who's worked obviously in energy or utilities and also partakes in the great outdoors? I don't think we see that connection talked about enough. I've seen it in Virginia that it works, that you can have industry and then simultaneously conservation efforts. And those cases aren't really talked about much. But what is your thinking on that? And do you think more of this type of viewpoint is going to be communicated going forward? Do you see more people in energy talking about this, their appreciation of wildlife especially?
Yeah, you said it. Stewardship. That is the word that comes to mind immediately. It's something that I value very much. I get maybe stereotyped sometimes by peers in the industry. Something about working in the renewable energy space that somehow you have to have a certain political stance on different things, and certainly not the case. So it's in fact to me my values and what I believe to be true about our world that we live in fit very well with what I'm trying to do and what we're trying to do here at GenPro. We are given this world to live on for a very brief amount of time, and it's our obligation to do with it the best that we can and leave it better than when we got here, and that's part of it. So I think what I do every day is try to be a steward of what I've been given and give those tools to other people. And, I think that there's a lot of us that, in my neck of the woods, I might be insulated a little bit, but, I live in a part of the country where everybody understands it very much. And I think it's not understood very much at all. You just have to be careful what you even post out on social media. I'd love to share the experience like you do. The deer that you harvested in beautiful state of Wyoming. Those should be good times, right? And we shouldn't be in fear of really sharing those opportunities. And but you and I both know that when we're out there in the field, it's my biggest priority to manage that herd, even though I don't own them, or they're not my responsibility solely, but it's my job to do what I can to make sure that that herd is as healthy as possible. And us, those that hunt, we provide a tremendous resource to those that are responsible for doing what's necessary to make sure that happens, and issuing out licenses at the right rate and the number. We are truly the biggest conservationists in this country when it comes to wildlife. No one can argue that. Data speaks for itself. That's how it is. We have more interest in making sure that wildlife succeeds and is healthy. And I love everything about being a steward and doing the right thing for what we've been given, and that 24/7. That's my job.
Have you noticed around you more people going hunting? Because here in Virginia, we've had quite the explosion, and different other states have also noticed a huge uptick in users who've gone hunting. Is that also being seen in South Dakota, you think?
It seems that way, yes. Of course, most of South Dakotans are very used to that anyway. Somebody in their family hunts, and it's sort of a traditional thing. But I do see a lot of energy with the younger people coming up, which is huge. Archery hunting tends to be a really big draw in this part of the world, and so I see a lot of young people getting into that. Specifically archery, and it's a challenging sport, and I see a lot of energy around that. We have great programs, great shops around the area that's promoting that. So I'm hopeful that this new generation comes up and kind of fills our shoes and takes the interest that we do in making sure that we conserve what we have.
It's important, and I think a lot of news outlets started to realize that. I saw different publications who don't positively regard hunting at all start to kind of change their tune. I think it was Washington Post being one. I never thought Pew Trust would talk highly about hunting, but I think they recognize just the importance of users to replenish those conservation dollars with Pittman Robertson funds. So now people are realizing, like, maybe we shouldn't have stigmatized hunters all these years. They actually play a major role in replenishing wildlife, habitat restoration, hunters education, and all these different facets. So maybe the narrative is changing a little bit. I mean, obviously, like you alluded to, people are still going to try to find ways to make noise about social media, gripping grins, and different postings. That still will be kind of a hurdle, but I think most people are at least waking up to the notion that hunting is not as bad as everyone portrays it to be.
I certainly hope so. Anybody has a doubt, call me up. I'll take you out this fall. You just need to experience it and understand it. And I think that's the biggest thing, is people aren't educated. Really, they're just sort of following a narrative that is not very accurate. And get into it and understand it and be honest and really study the issue would be my encouragement.
Well said. Lee, how can people connect with you and your company, learn more about it? Maybe if someone wants to apply to work for you guys, how can they go about that process?
We have a great question. Glad you asked. GenProEnergy.com is our website. We have several positions that we're hiring for right now. We are growing very quickly. It's an exciting time to get into this business, especially GenPro, where we're kind of on a really steep growth pattern right now. So GenProEnergy.com would be the place to go. They're posted there, and you can find me and my contact information there as well. And we're excited for where we're going.
Awesome. Thank you so much for updating me about your company, coming on to share your thoughts on what's happening in the industry, how you can coexist with existing utility companies and other energy type environments in the business sphere, kind of your philosophy when it comes to operating and hunting, of course. So Lee, thank you so much for coming on, and hopefully we'll get another chance to get together. I would love to see you and your wife again if I ever come back to the Black Hills of South Dakota.
You're always welcome, and I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely.